Remember when you could afford things? With tariffs potentially jumping to 60% on imports, those days might be over unless you take action now. The economic impact is massive. We're talking about $4.2 trillion in goods getting more expensive overnight. But here's the good news. There are specific loopholes and strategies that savvy consumers can use right now. Today I'm breaking down my top 5 methods to protect your money, including one technique that saved me $3,200 on my last major purchase. These aren't theoretical, they're the exact steps I use myself. The hidden tax you're paying every day. Did you know there's a secret tax hiding in almost everything you buy? It's not listed on your receipt, it doesn't show up in the price breakdown, but trust me, it's there, silently draining your wallet every single day. I'm talking about tariffs, and they're costing you way more than you think. Think of tariffs as a sneaky little tax that gets slapped on products when they cross borders. The crazy part? Most people have no idea they're paying them. When you grab that coffee maker off the shelf, you're not just paying for the product. You're also covering all those hidden tariff costs that got passed down the line. Let's talk numbers, and brace yourself because they're not pretty. The average American household is spending between $4,000 and $12,500 extra every year just because of tariffs. That's not pocket change. That's a vacation, a home renovation, or several months of rent just vanishing from your bank account. Want to see exactly where these costs are hiding? Let's break down something simple like a coffee maker. That $60 machine sitting on your counter isn't just one product. It's actually a collection of components from all over the world. The heating element might come from China with a 25% tariff, the circuit board from Taiwan with a 15% tariff, and even the plastic housing from Mexico faces import fees. By the time that coffee maker reaches your kitchen, those tariffs have stacked up and gotten baked into the price you paid. But it gets even wilder with smartphones. Pull out your phone right now and look at it. That tiny device in your hand contains components from more than 40 different countries. The processor might come from Taiwan, the camera from Japan, the display from South Korea, and the battery from China, each with different tariff rates. When a 25% tariff hits just the Chinese components, you're not paying 25% more for the phone, but those costs definitely aren't being absorbed by the manufacturer. They're being passed straight to you. Let's look at clothing next, because this is where things get really unfair. Tariffs on clothing items can range from 0% all the way up to 32%, depending on what the item is made of and where it comes from. The kicker? Lower-priced basics often face higher tariff rates than luxury items. That means budget-conscious shoppers end up paying a proportionally higher tariff tax than someone buying designer clothes. A $20 t-shirt might include $4 in tariff costs, while a $200 designer shirt might only have $10, meaning the tariff impact is 20% for the cheaper item, but only 5% for the luxury one. So how do these costs actually make their way to you? Picture a supply chain like a game of hot potato, except nobody wants to be left holding the extra costs. When the government slaps a tariff on an imported product, someone has to pay it up front, usually the importing company. But they don't just eat that cost. They pass it to the manufacturer, who passes it to the distributor, who passes it to the retailer, who, you guessed it, passes it right to you with a nice little markup at each step. Let me give you an example. A 10% tariff on a component doesn't mean the final product costs just 10% more. As that cost moves through the supply chain, each company adds their own markup to cover the tariff plus their profit margin. By the time it reaches you, that 10% tariff might have ballooned to a 17 to 22% price increase. The worst part, this isn't just happening with big purchases. It's affecting literally thousands of products you buy regularly. From the toothpaste in your bathroom to the bananas in your kitchen to the tires on your car. These hidden costs are everywhere, silently chipping away at your purchasing power day after day. Now, I know what you're thinking. If tariffs are such a big deal, why haven't I heard more about them? Well, that's by design. Tariffs are one of the most politically convenient ways to raise revenue because they're practically invisible to most consumers. You don't see tariff, $12.87, listed on your receipt when you buy something, so you never know exactly how much you're paying. The good news, once you understand how tariffs work, you can actually start avoiding them. There are specific strategies you can use to dodge these hidden taxes legally and ethically. And I'm not talking about some complex tax loophole that only the ultra-wealthy can use. I'm talking about practical approaches that anyone can implement starting today. The most important thing to understand is that not all products are affected equally. Tariff rates vary wildly depending on product categories, countries of origin, and even specific components within products. This inconsistency creates opportunities for smart consumers to make choices that significantly reduce their tariff burden. Think about it this way. If you could save thousands of dollars a year without changing your lifestyle, just by shopping more strategically, wouldn't you want to know how? The truth is, most financial advisors and consumer experts never talk about tariff avoidance strategies, either because they don't understand them or because they're too focused on mainstream financial advice. Understanding exactly how much tariffs are actually costing you right now is the first step to avoiding them. If you're in that average range, we're talking about $4,000 to $12,500 disappearing from your wallet every year. That's money that could be going toward your future, your family, or something you actually want, not just silently vanishing because you didn't know there was another option. Strategy number 1, strategic substitution, the car buying hack. Now let's talk about your next vehicle purchase, because this is where you can score some serious savings against those tariffs we've been discussing. The automotive industry might be taking you for an $8,000 ride without you even realizing it. Those steel and aluminum tariffs aren't just affecting random products. They're quietly jacking up the price of vehicles based on something most dealerships hope you never ask about. Here's the thing. Strategic substitution is your first powerful weapon against tariffs. It's simple. Find domestically produced alternatives to heavily tariffed products. And nowhere does this strategy pay off bigger than when you're buying a car. Let me blow your mind with something most people have no idea about. Those Toyota Tacomas imported from Mexico, the Chrysler Pacificas coming in from Canada, they're getting hit with significant tariff costs that end up in the final price tag. But here's the crazy part. You could buy what looks like the exact same vehicle and save thousands of dollars simply by choosing one with more domestic components. Think about this. During vehicle production, parts and components often cross the Canada-US border multiple times. And guess what happens each time they cross? Yep, more tariffs pile on. It's like a toll booth that keeps charging you over and over again for the same trip. Let me walk you through a real example. Take two seemingly identical Ford F-150s sitting on the lot. One was manufactured primarily in the US, while the other has more parts from Mexico or Canada. That difference in origin could translate to a price gap of several $1,000s, all because of where the parts came from. This isn't theoretical. This is happening right now on dealer lots across America. But wait, it gets worse. When additional tariffs hit, like that 10% tariff on Chinese imports, vehicles that use components manufactured in China get even more expensive. During the 2018 tariffs, Ford and General Motors reported over $1 billion in increased costs due to tariffs on steel and aluminum alone. And guess who ultimately paid for that? Not Ford or GM. You did through higher sticker prices. So how do you use this knowledge to your advantage? It all starts with something most car buyers never think to check, the VIN number. That string of letters and numbers isn't just random. It's a code that can save you thousands. The first digit of your VIN indicates the country of manufacture. But that's just the beginning. The full VIN, along with manufacturer information, can tell you exactly where the components in your vehicle came from. This matters because the percentage of domestic parts versus imported parts directly affects how much you'll pay in hidden tariff costs. Let me share a practical hack you can use on your next car purchase. Before you even step foot on a dealer lot, use the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's guidelines to check the domestic content percentage of vehicles you're interested in. Higher domestic content generally means fewer tariff costs baked into the price. For example, two midsize SUVs might look identical and have similar features, but if one has 75% domestic content while the other has only 35%, you could be looking at a price difference of thousands of dollars. That's money you could keep in your pocket just by doing a little research beforehand. And it's not just about where the final vehicle is assembled. The supply chain for modern vehicles is incredibly complex. A domestic vehicle might still have its transmission from Mexico, electronics from Japan, and various smaller components from a dozen other countries. Each of those international components potentially carries tariff costs that get passed on to you. So how much can you actually save? Let's put some numbers to it. On a typical $35,000 vehicle purchase, strategic substitution could save you anywhere from $2,500 to $8,000. That's not pocket change. That's enough to cover your gas costs for years, or even make your monthly payments for several months. The best part, this doesn't require extreme couponing skills or haggling with salespeople until midnight. It's simply about making an informed choice between similar products based on their supply chain structure. Here's your action plan for your next vehicle purchase. First, identify the vehicle category you're interested in and research models with high domestic content. The American Automobile Labeling Act requires manufacturers to provide this information. Second, check the first character of the VIN on vehicles you're considering. A 1, 4, or 5 indicates U.S. manufacturing, which often, but not always, means lower tariff impact. Third, ask the dealer-specific questions about part sourcing. They might not volunteer this information, but they do have it. Ask about the origin of the engine, transmission, and major electronic components. These are often the most expensive parts and can carry the highest tariff burden. Fourth, compare seemingly identical vehicles from different manufacturing plants. Sometimes the exact same model produced in different locations can have drastically different tariff costs embedded in the price. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a lot of work for something I might only do once every few years. But think about it this way. How many hours would you have to work to earn an extra $8,000? For most people, that's weeks or even months of labor. Spending a few hours researching could literally save you months of working time. And here's another bonus. Vehicles with higher domestic content tend to hold their value better in times of trade uncertainty. So not only do you save on the purchase, but you're also potentially protecting your investment against future tariff increases. Let me be clear, this isn't about being unpatriotic or avoiding certain brands. Many foreign manufacturers produce vehicles with high domestic content in U.S. factories, while some American brands source heavily from overseas. This strategy is simply about understanding the economics of global manufacturing and using that knowledge to your advantage. The car industry is actually the perfect example of how complex global trade has become. That Toyota might be more American-made than the Chevrolet parked next to it. The only way to know for sure is to check the specifics of each vehicle's supply chain. And if you're wondering if this really works, yes, it does. Consumers who use these strategies consistently report savings in the thousands on comparable vehicles. It's like having a secret discount code that most shoppers don't know exists. Strategy number 2, bulk purchasing before prices spike. Those car savings are impressive, but they're just the beginning of your tariff-dodging arsenal. What if I told you that $1.4 trillion worth of products are about to get significantly more expensive, and there's a specific timeline showing exactly when each price hike will hit your favorite items? This isn't some vague warning. I'm talking about concrete dates and percentages that will directly impact your wallet in the next few months. Let's talk about strategy number 2, bulk purchasing before prices skyrocket. This is all about timing your purchases strategically before new tariffs kick in. And trust me, there's a major deadline approaching that smart shoppers are already preparing for. Mark this date on your calendar, February 4th, 2025. That's when 2 massive tariff waves are set to hit. A 25% duty on imports from Mexico and Canada, plus a 10% tariff on Chinese imports. This isn't just affecting a few random products. We're talking about goods that make up over 40% of total U.S. imports and roughly 5% of our entire GDP. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, but which specific products should I stock up on? I've got you covered with the top 5 categories you need to watch. First up, electronics. Your smartphones, laptops, tablets, and gaming consoles are about to see serious price jumps. These devices already have tight profit margins, so manufacturers can't just absorb these costs. They'll pass them straight to you. That new smartphone you've been eyeing? Buy it before February if you want to avoid paying an extra 10 to 25% premium. Second, home improvement materials are going to take a massive hit, especially lumber and steel from Canada. If you've been putting off that renovation project, now might be the time to get those materials. The National Association of Home Builders has actually issued warnings that these tariffs will drive construction costs even higher, making the housing shortage even worse. Translation: the cost of building or renovating is about to jump significantly. Third, automotive components. Even if you're not buying a full vehicle, replacement parts will see similar price increases. Need new tires, a replacement bumper, or brake components? Stock up now while prices are lower. Fourth, medical devices and pharmaceuticals. While some life-saving medications may be exempt, many common drugs and medical supplies will face these new tariffs. If you take regular medications, talk to your doctor about potentially getting a longer supply before prices increase. Fifth, household appliances and textiles. Everything from washing machines to bed sheets is about to get more expensive. If you've been thinking about replacing that aging refrigerator or upgrading your home goods, the next few months are your window of opportunity. But here's the thing, buying in bulk only makes sense if you do the math correctly. Let me walk you through a simple calculation to determine if bulk buying makes financial sense for your situation. Start by identifying the expected price increase. For products from China, that's at least 10%. For Canadian or Mexican goods, prepare for 25% or more after accounting for supply chain markups. Then, look at your current inventory needs. How much of this product will you actually use in the next 6 to 12 months? There's no point saving 10% on something if half of it will go unused. Next, factor in storage costs. Do you have space to store these extra items? Will they expire or degrade in quality? For electronics and non-perishables, this is less of a concern, but for food items or certain materials, it's crucial to consider shelf life. Finally, calculate your return on investment. For example, if you're considering buying a $1,000 laptop that will likely cost $1,100 after tariffs, that's a potential $100 savings. But if you have to pay $30 in interest on your credit card to finance that purchase now, your net savings drops to $70. Let me give you a real-world example. Home improvement materials like lumber. If you're planning a deck project next summer, buying the materials now could save you 25% on Canadian lumber. On a typical deck requiring $3,000 in materials, that's $750 staying in your pocket just by purchasing a few months earlier. For electronics, the math is even clearer. That gaming console your kid wants for their birthday in March? Buying it before February could save you $50 to $75 compared to waiting. Now, I know not everyone has a warehouse to store stuff. So here are some practical storage solutions for your bulk purchases. For electronics and smaller items, dedicate a closet shelf or underbed storage containers. They don't take up much space, but represent significant savings. For building materials, consider weather-resistant storage options like tarps or plastic sheeting if you don't have garage space. Some lumber yards will even store your purchased materials for a small fee, still cheaper than paying the tariff increase. For household goods like paper products or cleaning supplies, utilize vertical storage space with shelving units in garages, basements, or utility rooms. Remember, the goal here isn't to hoard products. It's to make calculated purchases of items you'd buy anyway, just with strategic timing. Think of it as creating a buffer stock for your household, just like businesses do to protect against supply chain disruptions. Speaking of businesses, they're already implementing this exact strategy. Major companies are maintaining buffer stocks of key materials and essential components, specifically to shield against these announced tariff increases. They're not waiting around hoping prices won't increase. They're taking action now. The beauty of this approach is that it works for almost any budget. Even if you can't afford to stock up on everything, prioritize the big-ticket items that will see the largest absolute price increases. Focus on electronics over paper towels, building materials over cleaning supplies. I've created a simple 3-step framework to help you decide what to bulk purchase. Step 1. Identify products you regularly use that fall into the 5 categories I mentioned. Step 2. Check the country of origin. Look for Made in China, Made in Mexico, or Made in Canada labels. Step 3. Prioritize based on expected price increase percentage multiplied by the item's cost. For example, a $1,000 laptop from China, 10% tariff, represents a potential $100 savings, while a $20 t-shirt from Mexico, 25% tariff, only saves you $5. Focus your bulk buying budget on the laptop first. The key is creating your personal buying timeline based on both the tariff implementation dates and your own needs. Map out your expected purchases for the next 6 to 12 months. Then work backward from the February 4th deadline to determine what needs to be purchased when. Don't forget to consider sales cycles too. Black Friday and holiday sales combined with pre-tariff prices could create a double discount. Opportunity in the coming months. Smart shoppers are strategy number 3, navigating complex supply chains. Beyond just timing your purchases, there's a hidden dimension to tariff dodging that most people completely miss. Ever wonder why your neighbor paid $50 less for the identical TV model you bought? It's not just about when you buy. It's about understanding the invisible journey your products take before reaching store shelves. What if I told you that 2 completely identical products sitting on different store shelves could have totally different tariff costs baked into their prices? This isn't some conspiracy theory. It's the reality of how global supply chains work, and it's the secret to why some shoppers consistently pay less for the exact same stuff. Let's break down what a supply chain actually is. Think of it as the behind-the-scenes journey your products take, from raw materials to manufacturing to distribution, and finally to your shopping cart. Each product travels through a complex network involving dozens of companies, crossing multiple borders, and potentially facing different tariff rates along the way. Here's where it gets interesting. Retailers have incredible flexibility in how they structure these supply chains. Some go direct to manufacturer in high-tariff countries. Others use elaborate networks of intermediary countries to legally bypass certain tariffs. And the smartest ones? They're constantly shifting their sourcing strategies to minimize tariff exposure. Take this real-world example. A popular 55-inch smart TV might cost $499 at Store A, but $449 at Store B. Same brand, same model, same features. The difference? Store B has optimized its supply chain to route components through countries with more favorable trade terms. They're essentially playing tariff arbitrage and passing some of those savings on to you. So how do you take advantage of this? Start by becoming a supply chain detective. The first clue is often hiding in plain sight, the product origin code. These codes reveal exactly where a product was assembled or manufactured, which directly affects its tariff burden. Look for the Made in label, but don't stop there. Some products will have more detailed information if you know where to look. For electronics, flip the product over and look for small print or check the documentation that comes with it. For clothing, check the tag sewn into the garment. For food items, scan the packaging for country of origin labels. These seemingly insignificant details can tell you exactly which tariff rate schedule applies to that specific product. Next, create a comparison habit. When shopping for any major purchase, check the identical product at 3 different retailers, but make sure you're comparing the exact same model numbers. Take photos of the country of origin labels at each store. You'll start noticing patterns about which retailers consistently source from lower tariff pathways. Let's get specific about which retailers have mastered the supply chain game. Companies with massive global operations like Costco and Walmart have built sophisticated supply networks that can quickly pivot when tariff policies change. They're often first to reroute their supply chains through lower tariff countries, which can translate to price differences that show up months before smaller retailers can adjust. Online marketplaces like Amazon host sellers using different supply chains for identical products, which explains those price variations you see for the same item. The trick is checking the sold by information and the shipping origin country before buying. Regional chains like Meijer in the Midwest and H-E-B in Texas have developed specialized import relationships with specific countries, sometimes resulting in lower tariff exposure for certain product categories compared to national chains. Here's a practical step-by-step guide to becoming a supply chain navigator. Step 1. Identify high-tariff products in your regular shopping basket. Focus on electronics, appliances, clothing, and tools, categories where tariff rates can vary dramatically. Step 2. For your next major purchase, track the country of origin for that same product at different retailers. Take photos of the labels or packaging. Step 3. Create a simple spreadsheet comparing prices and countries of origin. You'll quickly see which stores consistently source from lower tariff countries. Step 4. For online purchases, use the filter by seller option when available, and prioritize sellers who ship directly from countries with favorable trade agreements. Step 5. Join online communities and forums where deal hunters share information about product sourcing. These savvy shoppers often highlight when identical products have different origins and prices. Let's calculate what this could mean for your budget. The average household spends about $1,500 monthly on goods potentially affected by tariffs. If you can shift just 25% of those purchases to lower tariff supply chains with a 10% price difference, that's $37.50 monthly or $450 annually back in your pocket. For a family making larger purchases like appliances or electronics, the savings can be substantially higher. Think about this strategy as strategic store switching. Instead of being loyal to one retailer, you're being loyal to your wallet by understanding which stores have optimized which supply chains for which products. Let me share a personal example. Last month, I was shopping for a new blender. The exact same model was $79 at one store and $65 at another. The difference? One was shipped through a distribution center in a country facing a 15% tariff, while the other came through a route with only a 5% tariff. That $14 difference represents most of the tariff savings being passed on to consumers who know where to look. This strategy works especially well for electronics, particularly components and accessories, kitchen appliances, tools and hardware, sporting goods, clothing, especially performance wear. Remember those stores advertising direct import deals? Now you understand why they can offer lower prices. They're cutting out middle countries that would add tariff burden to the product's journey. The beauty of supply chain navigation is that unlike bulk buying, it doesn't require storage space or upfront capital. It simply requires knowledge and attention to detail. And unlike waiting for sales, you can implement this strategy immediately on your very next shopping trip. Here's the really sneaky part. Many retailers count on consumers not knowing about these supply chain differences. They know most shoppers assume identical products should cost the same everywhere, so they pocket the difference when their supply chain advantage results in lower tariff costs. By becoming a supply chain navigator, you're essentially claiming your share of those savings. Strategy number 4, micro-investing in tariff-resistant sectors. Now that you're saving money as a supply chain navigator, let's talk about making your money actually fight back against these tariffs. What most financial advisors won't tell you is that certain investments don't just survive tariff wars. They thrive during them, potentially generating returns that could offset what tariffs are costing your household. While most people are watching their investments tank during trade tensions, a small group of savvy investors are quietly making money from the very policies draining everyone else's wallets. Let me show you how to join them. When tariffs hit, they don't affect all sectors equally. Think about it. When prices rise because of tariffs, certain industries get absolutely hammered while others barely feel a scratch. During previous tariff spikes, consumer staples sectors only dropped by about 2.4%, while healthcare fell just 7.3%. Meanwhile, other sectors were getting absolutely demolished. This pattern creates a massive opportunity for anyone paying attention. The trick is to direct even small amounts of money into these tariff-resistant areas through something called micro-investing. It's basically investing in tiny amounts, I'm talking as little as $5 at a time, that you can do right from your phone without needing a fancy investment advisor or huge amounts of capital. Let's talk specifics. Consumer staples is basically all the stuff you need regardless of the economy. Think toilet paper, toothpaste, medicine, and food. No matter how bad things get, people still buy these necessities. When tariffs drive up prices across the board, these companies can often pass those costs to consumers more easily than luxury goods makers can. The first ETF worth looking at is the Vanguard Consumer Staples ETF, ticker symbol VDC. This fund gives you instant exposure to dozens of companies that historically weather tariff storms better than most. We're talking about companies that make the products you'll buy whether times are good or bad. Healthcare is another sector that's shown remarkable resilience during trade wars. The VanEck Pharmaceutical ETF, ticker symbol PPH, offers concentrated exposure to companies developing and producing medications. Since many life-saving drugs are exempt from tariffs or face lower rates, this sector often dodges the worst impacts. Here's what's wild. While everyone's panicking about their portfolios during trade tensions, these defensive sector ETFs typically see much smaller declines. And in some cases, they've even posted gains while the broader market was tanking. That's exactly the kind of financial shield you want when tariffs are eating away at your purchasing power. Now, if you're feeling a bit more adventurous, there's a third category that's super interesting: microcap funds. These focus on really small companies that often fly under the radar of big investors. The cool thing about microcaps is that many of these companies are nimble enough to quickly adapt their supply chains or business models when tariff policies change. Something like the nifty Microcap 250 index has historically delivered impressive returns, often outperforming the broader market. These smaller companies sometimes benefit from trade conflicts because they can quickly pivot to domestic suppliers or find creative workarounds that bigger, slower companies can't implement. But how do I actually invest in these? I hear you asking. This is where micro-investing platforms come in clutch. Apps like Robinhood, Acorns, or Public make it ridiculously easy to start with literally pocket change. You don't need thousands of dollars or complicated brokerage accounts. Here's how simple it is. Download one of these apps, connect your bank account, and you can start with as little as $5. Some platforms even round up your everyday purchases to the nearest dollar and invest the spare change automatically. Buying a coffee for $3.50? The app rounds up to $4 and invests that 50 cents for you. It's basically investing on autopilot. The best part, you can specifically target these tariff-resistant ETFs I mentioned. Most of these platforms let you search by ticker symbol and by fractional shares, meaning you can own a tiny piece of an expensive ETF without having to buy a whole share. Now, let's talk about how this actually helps your household budget. Let's say tariffs are costing your household about $500 a month in higher prices. If you can direct just $50 a month into these defensive investments, you're creating a financial counterweight. During periods when tariffs cause widespread market disruption, these investments might gain 10 to 15%, while others are losing money. That $50 monthly investment wouldn't completely offset your tariff costs immediately, but over time, it could grow into a meaningful buffer. And the beauty is that you're building an asset while also protecting against inflation, something that cash sitting in a savings account simply can't do when prices are rising. What's particularly interesting right now is how these defensive investments could help offset costs from the elimination of the de minimis exemption. This change means even small consumer goods will now get hit with tariffs when previously they might have been exempt. As these new costs work their way through the system and hit your wallet, having investments in sectors that resist these pressures becomes even more valuable. Let me be crystal clear though, this isn't about getting rich quick. It's about creating a strategic financial defense against tariffs. Think of it as similar to how you diversify your diet for better health. You're diversifying your finances to better weather economic storms. And here's a secret that most investment advisors don't mention. You don't need to be Warren Buffett to make this work. You don't need to time the market perfectly or pick individual winners. The beauty of these sector ETFs is that they give you broad exposure to resilient industries without requiring you to become a stock-picking genius. The OECD has predicted that persistent tariffs will be a major drag on global economic activity and incomes. While governments might raise more revenue through tariffs, the overall hit to the economy means less money in everyone's pockets. By positioning your investments in sectors that historically perform better during these periods, you're essentially swimming with the current instead of against it. Now, I want to address something important. This strategy works regardless of your political views on tariffs. Whether you think tariffs are great policy or terrible economics doesn't matter. This is purely about protecting your personal finances from their impact, whatever your opinion might be. So let's recap this tariff-fighting investment strategy. 1. Focus on defensive sectors like consumer staples and healthcare through ETFs like VDC and PPH. 2. Consider adding exposure to nimble microcap companies. 3. Use micro-investing platforms to start with minimal amounts. 4. Invest consistently, even if it's just $5 or $10 at a time. 5. Think of these investments as a direct counterweight to rising tariff costs in your household. Remember, the goal isn't to completely eliminate the impact of tariffs on your finances. That would be unrealistic. The goal is to create a strategic offset that reduces their impact over time while building your wealth in the process. What's amazing about this approach is that you can start today with literally the cost of a fancy coffee. Unlike some of our other strategies that might require timing big purchases or researching product origins, this one can be implemented in minutes from your phone. Strategy number 5, advanced negotiation techniques for big purchases. While micro-investing can help offset tariff costs over time, what about those big purchases you can't avoid right now? I've got something that could save you thousands immediately. Remember that $3,200 in tariff costs I mentioned in a purchase I made recently? I didn't end up paying a dime of it. How? Through strategic negotiation that most consumers never attempt. Retailers have a dirty little secret they don't want you to know about. They actually have significant flexibility in how much of those tariff costs they pass on to you. But here's the kicker. They'll never voluntarily offer to absorb those costs unless you specifically ask in the right way. It's like a hidden margin that only savvy negotiators ever get to access. Let me walk you through exactly how this works. When a retailer imports products affected by tariffs, they have to decide how much of that additional cost to pass on to consumers. Most automatically pass 100% of it along, plus sometimes a little extra for good measure. But the truth is they often have room to absorb some or all of those costs if pushed, especially on high-margin items like furniture, electronics, and appliances. I recently used this technique when buying new kitchen appliances for my home renovation. The sales rep casually mentioned tariff surcharges that added $3,200 to my total. Instead of accepting this as inevitable, I used specific negotiation phrases that completely changed the conversation. Let's break down the 5 magic phrases that can unlock these hidden savings. Phrase number 1. Given the recent tariff changes, how can we adjust the pricing to make this deal work for both of us? This opener acknowledges the reality of tariffs while immediately framing them as a shared problem to solve together. Notice how it creates partnership rather than confrontation. When I used this on my appliance purchase, the salesperson's entire demeanor changed. He went from "these costs are fixed" to "let me see what I can do" in seconds. Phrase number 2. I understand tariffs are affecting your costs. What options do we have to mitigate these impacts in our pricing? This shows empathy for the seller's position while still directing the conversation toward solutions. It signals that you're informed about tariffs without being confrontational. The magic is in prompting them to offer concessions they'd never volunteer otherwise. Phrase number 3. With tariffs set to increase next month, I'd like to finalize our agreement before then. What can you do to help make that happen? This creates urgency based on actual tariff implementation timelines. Sellers often have more flexibility to absorb costs now rather than risk losing sales to future uncertainty. When I mentioned upcoming tariff increases to my appliance salesperson, he suddenly found $1,800 in managers' discretionary discounts. Phrase number 4. I've researched similar products with lower tariff exposure. What can you offer to keep me from choosing those alternatives? This leverages our previous strategy of substitution, but uses it as a negotiation tool instead. Even if you don't plan to substitute, showing knowledge of alternatives gives you leverage. The appliance store immediately offered free delivery and installation worth $450 when I mentioned looking at domestically produced alternatives. Phrase number 5. What if we increase the order size in exchange for you absorbing more of the tariff costs? Instead of simply asking for a discount, offer something of value, like a larger purchase. Sellers can often justify absorbing tariff costs when spreading them across multiple items. I ended up adding a dishwasher to my purchase, and in exchange, they eliminated the remaining tariff charges completely. Timing is absolutely crucial in these negotiations. Bring up tariffs too early, and you signal price sensitivity before establishing value. Too late, and the deal structure is already mentally locked in. The sweet spot? Right after you've shown serious interest, but before final negotiations begin. When I was buying those kitchen appliances, I waited until the salesperson was showing me premium models and had invested about 30 minutes in the process. At that point, I was a serious buyer, not just a browser, which gave my tariff concerns more weight. Not all retailers have the same flexibility to absorb tariff costs. Specialty retailers typically have higher margins and more negotiating room than big box stores on identical products. But even large chains have flexibility on high-margin items or when you're making multiple purchases. For example, specialty appliance stores can often absorb 15 to 25% of tariff costs on premium products, while furniture retailers commonly have 30 to 40% margins that include substantial tariff padding. Electronics stores typically have less flexibility on branded items, but significant room on accessories and extended warranties. Another key factor is understanding who you're negotiating with. Store managers and business owners have much more pricing flexibility than frontline sales staff. If your initial conversation doesn't yield results, politely ask, "Is there someone with pricing authority who might be able to help us work through these tariff issues?" Let's calculate what this strategy could save. You, on a $10,000 furniture purchase with 15% tariff impact, $1,500. Effective negotiation could save $750 to $1,000. For a major home appliance package of $8,000 with 20% tariff components, you might save $800 to $1,600. Even on electronics with tighter margins, a $2,000 purchase could yield $100 to $300 in tariff savings. The beauty of this approach is that unlike other strategies requiring research or timing, negotiation can be implemented immediately on purchases you need to make right now. You don't need to wait for market conditions to change or invest money to see results. Here's a real example from one of my viewers. John was purchasing a new leather sectional with a sticker price of $4,200. The salesperson mentioned a materials surcharge of $630 related to import tariffs. Using phrase number 4 about alternatives with lower tariff exposure, followed by phrase number 5 offering to add a matching ottoman to his purchase, John got the retailer to completely waive the tariff charge, saving $630 while getting an additional piece he wanted anyway. Remember that successful tariff negotiations aren't about confrontation. They're about creating win-win scenarios where you acknowledge the reality of tariffs while exploring options that work for both parties. The key is approaching the conversation with confidence based on knowledge. What's shocking is how few consumers ever attempt these negotiations. Retailers count on your assumption that prices are fixed and non-negotiable, especially when they blame external factors like tariffs. But now you know better, the unfair tariff burden on lower-income households. Those negotiation tactics work great when you have buying options, but what happens when you're already stretching every dollar? Let's talk about the dirty secret behind tariffs that nobody's discussing. They're essentially a hidden tax system that disproportionately hammers working families. When tariffs hit products, they don't impact everyone equally. According to fresh research, tariffs function almost identically to a regressive sales tax, with the financial pain concentrated on those who can least afford it. The numbers are shocking. The OECD predicts the current tariff situation could reduce household disposable income by around $1,040 per year. But here's where it gets truly unfair. That burden falls much heavier on lower-income families. Why? Let's break it down. If you're making $150,000 a year, losing $1,000 to tariff costs might be annoying, but it represents less than 1% of your income. But if you're making $30,000, that same $1,000 is eating up over 3% of everything you earn. This is exactly what economists mean when they talk about the regressive nature of tariffs. They take a much bigger bite, percentage-wise, from those with smaller incomes. What makes this system even more twisted is how tariffs are structured on everyday necessities. The Federal Reserve and Harvard economists found something that should make your blood boil. Tariff rates are, on average, 1.2 percentage points higher on lower-end consumer goods compared to high-end versions of the same products. This means budget versions of products that lower-income families rely on actually face higher tariff rates. Think about the electronics aisle. When a working family needs a new microwave or laptop for their kids' schoolwork, they're typically buying products that face steeper tariff rates than the premium versions wealthy shoppers purchase. Those Chinese-made consumer electronics that budget-conscious shoppers depend on, they're getting hit with some of the most aggressive tariff increases. It gets worse when we look at clothing and household goods. These essentials make up a significantly larger portion of a lower-income family's budget compared to wealthier households. When tariffs drive up prices on these items, families already struggling to make ends meet have no choice but to absorb those costs or go without. The substitution strategy we discussed earlier, it works great if you have options. But lower-income households often don't have the luxury of choosing alternatives. When you're shopping on a tight budget, you're already buying the most affordable option available. There's nowhere to go but up in price, which defeats the whole purpose of trying to avoid tariff costs. Even bulk buying strategies can be out of reach. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, stocking up on items before tariff increases hit requires cash reserves many families simply don't have. The very people who would benefit most from these saving strategies often can't access them because they require upfront capital. And the investment strategy? Let's be real. When every dollar is already accounted for in your monthly budget, setting aside money to invest in tariff-resistant ETFs might seem impossible. The financial cushion needed to implement many of these protective strategies is precisely what lower-income households lack. This creates a devastating cycle. Those with the least financial flexibility end up paying the highest percentage of their income in tariff costs, which further reduces their financial flexibility. It's like being stuck in financial quicksand, where every struggling movement just pulls you deeper. The data visualization comparing tariff burdens across income brackets tells the story clearly. Households in the bottom 20% of income distribution face a tariff burden that's nearly 3 times higher as a percentage of their income compared to households in the top 20%. This isn't just unfair. It's a hidden system of regressive taxation that flies under the radar of most political discussions. Experts from the Economic Policy Institute have been sounding the alarm on this issue, emphasizing that tariffs function essentially as a sales tax on consumers, with the burden falling primarily on American shoppers rather than foreign producers. And as with most sales taxes, they hit lower-income families hardest. Even more frustrating is that tariffs often fail at their stated purpose. The research shows they rarely effectively protect domestic industries and instead create inefficiencies that harm the very sectors they aim to support. These inefficiencies lead to higher prices for consumers, particularly impacting those with lower incomes who have less flexibility in their budgets. So what can budget-conscious households do? While the deck is stacked against them, there are still some modified strategies that can help. First, focus on the negotiation techniques we covered for. Necessities you absolutely can't avoid buying. Even small wins on tariff absorption can make a meaningful difference when every dollar counts. Second, community pooling resources for bulk purchases can help spread the upfront costs. Organize with neighbors, friends, or family members to make larger purchases together and split the savings. Third, look for timing advantages. Many retailers offer deep discounts when new models are released. Buying last year's model of a necessary item right as the new version launches can sometimes offset tariff costs. Fourth, explore manufacturer refurbished options, especially for electronics. These often come with warranties and significantly lower prices that can counteract tariff impacts. Fifth, when possible, repair instead of replace. Learning basic repair skills for clothing and household items can extend their lifespan and delay new purchases until tariff situations stabilize. The reality is that lower-income households need these strategies the most, but face the biggest barriers to implementing them. That's why understanding which strategies are most accessible, like negotiation and targeted timing of necessary purchases, is crucial for those feeling the heaviest tariff burden. This unfair distribution of tariff costs isn't just a financial issue, it's a matter of economic justice. The system essentially forces those with the least to shoulder the heaviest burden, while those with financial flexibility have both the means to absorb the costs and the options to avoid them. For example, when tariffs hit products like children's clothing or school supplies, families can't simply choose not to buy them. These aren't luxury purchases that can be postponed. They're necessities with demand that economists call inelastic, meaning people need to buy them regardless of price increases. And while wealthy consumers might barely notice the extra costs, for lower-income families, tariff-driven price increases can mean impossible choices between necessities like food, medicine, utilities, or school supplies. Each price increase forces painful trade-offs that more affluent households never have to consider. Your personalized tariff protection plan. Those painful trade-offs aren't inevitable for anyone, not when you have a personalized defense plan. Most families are unknowingly using the wrong tariff-fighting strategies for their specific financial situation. What works brilliantly for your neighbor might actually cost you money, while the perfect combination of tariff-fighting moves for your household has been hiding in plain sight all along. Let's get practical about this. I'm about to show you how to create your custom tariff defense strategy in under 60 seconds using just 3 simple questions. This isn't some one-size-fits-all approach. It's about matching the right strategies to your unique financial fingerprint. Think of this as your personal decision tree that helps you determine which combination of our 5 strategies will save you the most money right now. Here's how it works. First question. What major purchases do you have planned in the next 6 months? This matters enormously because your upcoming big purchases represent your largest potential tariff exposure, but also your biggest saving opportunities. Second question. What's your household income? This helps determine which strategies will give you the most bang for your buck based on your financial flexibility. Third question. What are your typical shopping habits? This reveals which daily and weekly purchasing patterns might be costing you the most in hidden tariff costs. Once you answer these 3 questions, you'll have a customized plan that prioritizes exactly which strategies will work hardest for your specific situation. Let me walk you through a few examples to show you how differently this plays out depending on your answers. Example number 1. Meet the Andersons, a high-income household planning to purchase a new car next month. Based on their decision tree results, their optimal strategy combination starts with strategic substitution. By identifying vehicle models with higher domestic content percentages, they could potentially save thousands on that single purchase. For the Andersons, a secondary strategy of negotiation techniques makes perfect sense. With their higher income, they have flexibility to wait for the right deal and leverage their knowledge of tariff costs during negotiations. Their personal tariff protection plan would focus heavily on these 2 strategies because they deliver the biggest immediate impact for their specific situation. Example number 2. The Martinez family represents our middle-income household example. They're planning some home renovations in the coming months, but not immediately. Their decision tree reveals that bulk purchasing should be their primary strategy. By identifying which renovation materials are likely to see tariff-driven price increases and buying those specific items now, they can lock in current prices before the expected 25% jump. For the Martinez family, this approach pairs perfectly with supply chain navigation as a secondary strategy. Knowing which retailers source their materials through optimized supply chains allows them to comparison shop effectively for items they can't buy in bulk. This combination gives them maximum protection against their specific tariff vulnerabilities. Example number 3. The Williams family represents our budget-conscious household with limited discretionary spending. Their decision tree shows their optimal primary strategy is advanced negotiation techniques. Since they make frequent small purchases rather than occasional large ones, learning how to negotiate tariff absorption on essential purchases ensures they maximize every dollar. For the Williams family, their secondary strategy focuses on micro-investing in tariff-resistant sectors. Even small investments of $5 to $10 weekly can create a financial counterweight to offset some of their unavoidable tariff costs over time. Their personalized plan acknowledges their financial constraints while still providing meaningful protection. What makes this approach so powerful is how it adapts to your specific circumstances. The decision tree doesn't just tell you which strategies to use. It helps you determine the right sequence and proportion for implementing them. For instance, if you answered that you have a major appliance purchase coming up, but limited income and frequent discount shopping habits, your optimal plan might involve concentrating 70% of your efforts on negotiation techniques, 20% on supply chain navigation, and 10% on micro-investing. But what about calculating the actual savings? Let's break it down by household type. For high-income households implementing their personalized plan, we typically see potential annual savings of $2,000 to $3,500, with the bulk coming from major purchase strategies. Middle-income households generally realize savings of $1,200 to $1,800 annually through their customized approach. Budget-conscious households can still protect $500 to $900 per year by following their tailored plan. The methodology here is critical. By prioritizing strategies based on immediate financial impact, you focus your energy where it matters most for your specific situation. This ensures you're not wasting time on approaches that won't deliver meaningful results for your particular household structure. Let's make this super practical. Pull out your phone right now and answer those 3 questions for yourself. What major purchases do you have planned in the next 6 months? What is your household income? What are your typical shopping habits? Based on your answers, here's what your personalized protection plan might look like. If you're planning a car purchase soon and have higher income, start with strategic substitution immediately. Research vehicles with higher domestic content percentages this week. Then use advanced negotiation techniques when you're ready to buy, potentially saving thousands on that single purchase. If you're planning home renovations with a middle income, focus first on bulk purchasing materials before anticipated tariff increases. Create your shopping list this week, identifying which items face the highest tariff exposure. Then research which retailers offer those items through optimized supply chains to minimize costs. If you're budget conscious with limited discretionary spending, master those negotiation phrases we covered for absorbing tariff costs on essential purchases. Start practicing them this week on your next few purchases. Then consider setting up automatic micro-investments of even just $5 weekly into one of the tariff-resistant ETFs we discussed. The beauty of this framework is that it evolves with your financial situation. As your circumstances change, you can quickly reassess and adjust your strategy mix for maximum protection. What about this month specifically? To determine which strategies will save you the most money this month, simply identify your largest upcoming expense in the next 30 days and apply the primary strategy from your personalized plan to that purchase first. This focused approach ensures you get the biggest immediate win possible. For example, if you're planning to buy a new washing machine this month, knowing whether to use strategic substitution, timing the purchase before a tariff increase, or negotiating tariff absorption could save you $100 to $200 on that single purchase. Tools exist to help calculate your personal tariff exposure across major spending categories. These can reveal surprising insights about where you're most vulnerable and help you fine-tune which strategies will yield the highest savings for your specific spending patterns. Tracking tariff news without going crazy. Calculating your tariff exposure is just half the battle. Knowing when to act on that information is where most people crash and burn. Notice how some folks seem to always buy right before prices jump while you're stuck paying the tariff tax. The difference isn't luck, it's their information diet. Let's be honest, keeping up with tariff news can feel like drinking from a fire hose. One headline says prices skyrocketing tomorrow, while another claims tariffs have minimal impact. Who do you believe? Most people either ignore all tariff news and get caught off guard, or obsessively track every headline and make panic purchases based on misinformation. Here's the truth. 80% of tariff reporting is just noise designed to get clicks, not help you make smart decisions. When was the last time a news headline actually helped you save money? Probably never. I've developed a stupidly simple system to cut through the clutter and only focus on tariff information that will actually affect my finances. And no, it doesn't involve checking the news 24/7 or becoming an economics expert. First, let's talk about where not to get your tariff information. Most major news networks and financial channels love to sensationalize tariff news because drama equals ratings. They'll report on potential tariffs as if they're already implemented, causing unnecessary panic buying. Social media is even worse. I've seen countless posts claiming 50% tariffs on all imports starting next week. That turned out to be completely false. The problem is that by the time you realize it was fake news, you've already made unnecessary purchases or stress-bought items you don't need. Industry blogs can be equally problematic. They're often funded by companies with a vested interest in how you react to tariff news. When an electronics industry blog warns about massive tariffs coming on all tech products, consider who benefits when you rush to buy that new laptop immediately. So where should you turn? The Tax Foundation stands out as one of the most reliable sources. They regularly update their data on tariffs and economic impacts, with a focus on practical implications for consumers and businesses. Their reporting cuts through political spin and focuses on actual implementation dates and affected product categories. The International Trade Commission and OECD reports are also gold mines of accurate information. The OECD has specifically reported that tariffs significantly impact economic growth and inflation, highlighting that consumers ultimately bear these costs. Their data helps you prepare for actual price increases instead of hypothetical ones. But here's the thing. You don't need to read these sources daily. Instead, set up custom Google alerts for specific keywords related to your personal spending categories. For example, if you're planning to buy a new refrigerator soon, create alerts for tariff refrigerator or appliance import tax. This targeted approach means you'll only receive notifications about tariff changes that might actually affect your planned purchases. No more drowning in irrelevant information about industrial chemical tariffs when you're just trying to figure out if your kids' back-to-school clothes will cost more this year. Now, let's get practical. I've created a personal tariff tracking sheet that's changed the game for me, and it takes less than 15 minutes to set up. Open a spreadsheet and create these simple columns. 1. Product category, electronics, furniture, clothing, etc. 2. Current tariff rate. Look this up once from reliable sources. 3. Announce changes, new rates, and when they take effect. 4. Implementation date, when prices will actually increase. 5. Current prices. Note prices you've seen for items you plan to buy. This sheet becomes your personal tariff dashboard. When you hear about a potential tariff change, you can quickly check if it affects anything you're planning to purchase and decide if you need to adjust your timeline. For example, when I heard about potential furniture tariffs, I checked my sheet and saw I was planning to buy a new couch in 6 months. The tariff would be implemented in 4 months, so I either needed to buy earlier or adjust my budget. This simple system saved me about $300 without requiring me to become a tariff expert. Another key point: don't fall for misleading tariff reporting that exaggerates immediate impacts on consumer prices. While a 25% tariff might suggest a direct 25% price increase, the actual retail price increase is often lower due to various factors like retailer pricing strategies and market competition. This knowledge helps you avoid panic buying based on worst-case scenarios. When filtering tariff news, focus on data from established economic research institutions. The International Monetary Fund and U.S. International Trade Commission provide comprehensive analyses that cut through political spin. Their reports help you distinguish between announced tariffs, which may change, and implemented tariffs, which will actually affect prices. Let me show you how this works in practice. Remember when tariffs on washing machines were announced in 2018? Most news outlets reported washing machine prices to jump 25% next month. But customers who tracked reliable sources knew that 1. The implementation date was 45 days after the announcement. 2. Existing inventory wouldn't be affected. 3. Only certain brands sourced primarily from the affected countries. This knowledge gave savvy consumers a clear timeline for making purchases without panic. They knew exactly how long current prices would hold and which specific models would be affected. Setting up custom alerts is easier than you think. On Google Alerts, enter specific combinations like tariff increases electronics or tariff news furniture. Set the frequency to once a week rather than as it happens to avoid information overload. Then add one more crucial filter. Select news as your source type to screen out social media noise and opinion pieces. The best part about this system is that it takes minimal time but pays massive dividends. 15 minutes of setup and maybe 5 minutes per week to review any relevant alerts. That's it. No doom scrolling through financial news, no panicking over every announcement. Here's what this looks like in action. When you get an alert about a potential new tariff on electronics from China, check your tracking sheet to see if you have any planned electronics purchases. If yes, verify the implementation date and affected products. If the tariff will affect your purchase and implementation is before your planned purchase date, you have 3 options. Buy sooner, look for alternatives from unaffected countries, or adjust your budget expectations. This targeted approach helps you monitor specific product categories likely to be affected by tariffs, such as electronics, clothing, and household goods. By tracking just the categories relevant to your spending, you can make informed purchasing decisions before prices actually rise. Remember, the goal isn't to become a tariff expert. It's to save money without losing your mind. With just a few minutes of organized tracking each week, you can make informed decisions while everyone else
Putting it
is
all
either
together,
panic buying
your 30-day
or getting
tariff
caught off
action
guard
plan.
by price increases.
Now
That you've got your tracking system in place, it's time to turn that information into action. The next 30 days represent a critical window where specific moves, made in the right order, can shield your finances from the massive tariff hit about to impact American households. With February's 25% tariff on Mexican and Canadian imports affecting $1.4 trillion in goods, your actions this month will determine whether you're paying the full tariff tax or watching it pass you by. Let me break down exactly what to do starting today. I've created a 30-day action plan that divides everything into manageable weekly chunks, so you won't feel overwhelmed trying to implement all 5 strategies at once. Week 1 is all about assessment. Pull out your bank and credit card statements from the last 3 months. Highlight every purchase that might be affected by the upcoming tariffs, especially anything from Mexico, Canada, or China. This might seem tedious, but I promise it's worth the 20 minutes. You'll quickly see patterns in your spending that reveal your biggest tariff vulnerabilities. For example, take a typical household's monthly expenses. Groceries might include $200 worth of produce from Mexico, electronics purchases might total $350 from China, and home goods could include $175 of items manufactured in Canada. By identifying these patterns, you'll know exactly where to focus your tariff-fighting efforts. Create a quick spreadsheet with 3 columns: the item, its country of origin, and the applicable tariff rate. This becomes your personal tariff exposure calculator. For items from Mexico and Canada, multiply by 0.25. For Chinese goods, multiply by 0.10. The total gives you your monthly tariff exposure, the amount you could be paying extra if you don't take action. Week 2 transitions to research. Now that you know your exposure, it's time to identify alternatives for your most expensive tariffed items. If your assessment revealed you're buying a lot of electronics from China, research comparable models manufactured elsewhere. For Canadian lumber, check if there are domestic suppliers or alternative materials that could work for your projects. This is also the week to create your bulk buying shortlist. Focus only on non-perishable essentials you know you'll use eventually. Things like household supplies, personal care items, or shelf-stable foods that won't go to waste. Remember, buying something you don't need just because there's a tariff coming isn't saving money. It's spending money unnecessarily. A particularly effective strategy during week 2 is to identify which local retailers are sourcing through lower tariff supply chains. Call stores directly and ask specific questions about where their products are manufactured. You might be surprised how many customer service representatives will gladly share this information if you explain you're trying to make informed purchasing decisions. Week 3 is preparation week. This is when you'll finalize your substitution list, prepare for any necessary bulk purchases, and set price alerts for big-ticket items you've identified. If you've decided strategic substitution makes sense for an upcoming purchase, start visiting stores to physically examine the alternatives you researched in week 2. This is also the time to look at your investment portfolio if you're implementing the micro-investing strategy. Even setting aside just $50 this week toward tariff-resistant sectors could start building your financial counterweight to rising prices. Most importantly, week 3 is when you should prepare your negotiation scripts for any major purchases happening in the next 30 to 60 days. Write down exactly what you'll say to retailers about absorbing tariff costs, and practice your delivery so you sound confident when the time comes. Week 4 is action time. Execute your bulk purchases for essential items before the tariff implementation dates. Make sure you're only buying things you'll definitely use, and that you have proper storage solutions. If you've been eyeing a major purchase from a tariff-affected country, this is your last chance to buy before prices increase. For example, if you've been considering a new tablet or laptop, buying in week 4 could save you up to 10% compared to waiting until after the tariffs take effect. For items you can't buy immediately, implement your supply chain navigation strategy by purchasing from retailers who source through lower tariff channels. Those price comparisons you did in week 2 will come in handy now. Throughout this entire process, prioritize your strategies based on your unique spending patterns. If you're planning a home renovation this year, focus first on purchasing the materials that will see the biggest tariff impacts. If you're a tech enthusiast who regularly upgrades gadgets, prioritize your electronics purchasing strategy. Let me show you how this works in practice with a simple decision tree. First question: is your purchase an immediate necessity? If yes, move to the price check question. If no, consider delaying until tariff policies stabilize. Second question: is the price difference between pre-tariff and post-tariff significant enough to justify immediate purchase? For a $1,000 item facing a 10% tariff, that's $100 in potential savings, probably worth acting on. For a $20 item facing the same tariff, the $2 savings might not justify rushing. Third question: is there a domestically produced alternative? If yes, compare the quality and price difference. If the domestic option costs more than the imported version plus the tariff, stick with the imported version, but buy it before tariffs hit. Fourth question: does the retailer have negotiating flexibility? For high-margin items like furniture or appliances, the answer is usually yes, making negotiation your best strategy. For lower margin items like groceries, focus on substitution or bulk buying instead. Following this decision framework ensures you're applying the right strategy to each purchase, maximizing your savings while minimizing unnecessary spending. Now let's talk about immediate actions you should take this week, regardless of where you are in the 30-day plan. First, check your pantry and household supplies. Identify any items you regularly use that come from tariff-affected countries and consider whether stocking up makes financial sense. Second, review any planned major purchases for the next 6 months. If any of these items are likely to be affected by tariffs, consider whether moving up your timeline could save significant money. Third, set up price tracking for specific items you've identified as tariff vulnerable. Apps like Camel for Amazon or Honey can alert you to price changes, helping you identify when tariffs are being factored into retail prices. Fourth, call customer service for any planned big purchases and directly ask about upcoming price changes related to tariffs. Many companies have already calculated these increases, but won't publicize them until they take effect. Finally, check your emergency fund. With economic uncertainty often following major tariff implementations, ensuring you have adequate savings becomes even more important. What kind of results can you expect from this 30-day plan? Let's look at some real numbers. A typical household implementing these strategies before the February tariff implementation could save between $500 to $800 in the first month alone on planned purchases. For a family planning significant home improvements or technology upgrades, the savings could easily exceed $1,500 to $2,000. Remember that these savings aren't theoretical. They represent real money that stays in your pocket rather than being paid as higher prices due to tariffs. And unlike cutting expenses or searching for better deals, this approach focuses specifically on avoiding artificial price increases that aren't related to the actual value of the products you're buying. Now, let me tell you the most powerful part of this whole tariff dodging strategy. Being proactive before these tariffs hit can literally save you thousands of dollars annually. It's not just about saving a few bucks here and there. It's about taking control of your financial future when everything else feels chaotic. The real magic happens when you combine all these approaches together. Buy that big-ticket item domestically to avoid the import tax. Stock up on essentials before prices skyrocket next month. Shop at stores with smarter supply chains for your regular purchases. And don't forget to use those negotiation tactics we talked about. Don't just sit back and accept these hidden costs. Take action on at least one strategy this week, even if it's just researching which of your planned purchases might be affected. Your bank account